Thank you so much, Leanna. All right, it is my pleasure to announce our third reader for the evening. Timothy Donnelly's most recent books are The Problem of the Many and the 2012 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award-winning The Cloud Corporation. A Guggenheim Fellow, he teaches poetry at Columbia University and lives in Brooklyn with his family. Welcome, Timothy.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Malvern Books, for letting me read here with these two terrific poets. Logan, it's great hearing you, and Leanna, it's great hearing you too. It's terrific being back in Austin and in this wooden corner, iconic wooden corner. I love it here, and I'm very happy to have made it before all flight and travel and movement is forbidden. Things are really drastic back home in New York City right now. I'm going to start with a poem. I'm going to read 9 poems. Some of them are short. I'm going to start with one called Stunt, which I think of in many respects as being kind of my origin story as a poet. Early on in the undertaking, I imagined backing out of it. This allowed me to continue outwardly, while inwardly I had stopped. Not to make too much of it, but everything followed accordingly. The human, in my experience, will speak until you agree. Agree, or it will lean too close and bring its hands. Protect what refuses by corrupting it into something scarce. I don't want to ruin it, but in reality, there's no choice. I agree about the weather. I agree to the human voice in its red declamation. But when what punishes has penned itself in sleep, I reduce what words it uses into a toxin I can say. What is real? And though we had fed long and well at the table, the talk always turned to whether to go on, regardless of what it might say about our moral sense, regardless of what it might cost us in the end, or whether the time had come to surrender, let the sum of our particles back into the flow, hoping they might, in the long view, recombine into something of value or of beauty, but humbler than the human. Not that we'd ever be able to judge, not that we'll ever be able to know what comes of what we did, or whether it was worth it, like the towering alien humanoid at the start of Ridley Scott's Prometheus, how it paces to the edge of a powerful waterfall somewhere on what appears to be a still primarily mineral earth, takes one last look at its oblong mothership, surveilling from a mist, removes its monk-like robe, and drinks as if in ceremony from a cup of animate metallic ooze that quickly disintegrates its all-too-pale flesh, unleashing new organic matter into the ecosystem, strands of DNA unzipping haphazardly in the rush to mix it up with Earth's own chemistry and into offspring whose tumble up it will never witness. Not the earliest infinitesimal blips or supper time in old Persepolis, not opaque dawn in Beijing or any single sentient being separated a moment from the chaos, wholly unobserved, in whom life sank down as if to test itself, limitless, dark, spreading, unfathomably deep and free, as if at play in ether, a meadow of possibility skittering as axons of foam across the surface swell of the North Sea. I felt once I belonged to it in a way I would collapse the instant I began measuring it in words. Waves in blue profusion dissolving into geological undulations and then pulses in yellow sand. Here a snake crosses my path again in Texas, the length of it like a dew-damp privilege, wriggled by a cloud-hid hand, conveying deep troughs and amplitudes back to the sun. We do go on. Ne'er movie's end, the last known humanoid of the type to seed life on Earth is uprooted from cryogenic sleep on a made-up moon by a crew of corporate human blunderers. It then looks down on with informed disgust, killing off in minutes all but one. In America, Baudrillard says the products of our imagination remind us what is real, the way weariness of existence is how we come to feel. Buried in all this abundance, we are still alive. Hold on tight, my circumstance. Tonight we're diving in. Tonight we'll find the baseline subatomic style. Let particles of us entangle knowingly with those of a gold encyclopedia in the ruins of Vienna, or an air of teosinte across an open border, a common source of being. Before I die, let us be, let being be, continuous, continuous. This is called The Stars Down to Earth. The sea is pewter gray with green in it like music. The green is lit in places where the waves begin to rise. They rise and thin and curve, sieving sunlight through them. They beat against the rocks until they flatten into froth. The froth is white like wool. The froth is white like thought that catches in the hedge or in the barbed wire fence strung between the pasture and a narrow gravel road. The froth is white like wool that stretches into glistening through the milder rains of March, or in a fog that feeds it constant countless droplets borrowed from the sea. The sea is bluer now, with less green in it than earlier. The sea is architectural, but the froth is more like thought that catches on a thorn and stretches into glistening after mizzle, after fog, conducting sunlight in the morning when lambs are in the dew asleep on deep green clover, when stars fade out of view without a sound but of the earth. The sea is even bluer, closer to the color I would think to paint the sea, then something living underneath it, something rumored of enlarged, shaken into wakefulness as clouds arrive like lambs awakened from damp clover. The hillside is on fire. Smoke is darker than the clouds and darker than froth. It rises on an angle like a thought that knits its aerosols into the clouds, almost successfully. The sea darkens its brow. The sea is blurred brocade on the sofa in the basement a face is forced into. The lambs are pinned down by the forelimbs, shackled and hoisted. The froth is voiceless. What is manipulable is manipulated almost endlessly. The sea is at its darkest, having eaten its shadow backwards. It drags the earth it spits out back into itself like pewter music. Time is on the narrow gravel road, and wool is on the barbed wire fence as stars force the awakening into history. The sea is indistinguishable from sky now, the headlights approaching like a thought beaten against the mizzle, beaten into droplets, hoisted up like stars from the sea. Something living underneath it rises from the basement, glistening through the froth as time feeds itself on the hillside, conducting the music of the sea up to the heavens and of the stars down to earth. Gifted. My breath sounded more like a recording of breath than actual breathing, and not a high-quality studio recording, but something cheap and muffled, something made on a small, lightweight device designed to be placed inside a plush white bear presented to a child on some special occasion. Plush white bear with the sound of my breath in it, a gift for a child with such low expectations. A toy of this kind should be cherished instantly and for a long time to come. But no, not this child. Child who isn't quite what we thought. Child who takes on inhuman proportions, who damages surfaces, who tears the bear apart with both hands and holds the recording device in victory against the sun. What comfort is it that the child is ambidextrous? What he will do with those hands is unspeakable. Thank you. I'm happy that got a laugh from you. I do need to be very funny. This poem is called All Through the War. Guess there goes that. And it's dedicated to my daughter, Ada. All Through the War. I couldn't remember any of it any more than I could feel the corporate brotherhood at work among my breakfast flakes or in those protein shakes I drank to keep my strength up. I couldn't feel the toxicity the way I thought I should. Little silver pinpricks in my liver and then all over my body, steadily proceeding to a brownout in my limbic system, the not knowing when I was, if or where we were at war with, and for what reason now. All the time I stopped eating meat again. I stopped eating sugar. I bought 4 watches, each watch stopped. I bought a pound of raw, rough bulk lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and I couldn't stop my tongue from licking a certain piece of it like a dirty blue wedge of Toblerone to know how it would feel. As for time, I didn't always feel right with it, especially when alone, especially by the sea, where time widens to include more of itself, partly because of the motion and partly because of sound, which is also motion. A decade of drone strikes in the north couldn't stop Pakistani street vendors from salt roasting sweet corn in pans like steep-sided woks. My eyesight grew worrisome. I felt light tingling in my extremities and left cheek I imagined meant diabetes, but it turned out to be nothing. I turned out to be fine. Last week, an airstrike in Somalia targeting an insurrectionist youth group killed a dozen or so. Yesterday, they seized a village in the center of the country. After my father's surgery, I went to Ireland on my own. I told the lighthouse keeper I was worried something was wrong with me because I couldn't stop looking at the water with all its changing shapes and color. She said, "We are all the same here, love, all the same." Often in quiet, I can still feel the stone's abrasion on my tongue. I pulled a lichen from the Bronze Age megalith with intent to burn it back home. I made Syrian red pepper and walnut dip flavored with cumin and pomegranate molasses. There is nothing more delicious when eating this. How many seeds did Persephone take? I thought I could cry for my friend no further until I opened her armoire to lay to rest her scented shirts in an appliance box. White, off-white, shell pink, true pink, lilac, lavender, blue. As polar seas warm up, the shrinking difference in air pressure between the poles and the equator weakens the jet stream and makes its path wobblier, explaining all this erratic weather we've been up to. The Senate voted against the resolution to stop support of the Saudi intervention in Yemen as Trump took lunch with the Saudi crown prince. I wake with scratches I can't explain. I order herbal supplements at night online and forget what for by the time they get here. Ashwagandha, schizandra. I read objects are more like events with longevity. On average, 130 Yemeni children died each day last year of extreme hunger and disease. A Saudi blockade on seaports stops the ships delivering aid. These are casualties of war. The instant the technician's needle found a vein, the seascape on the wall rattled uncontrollably. She whispered the clinic used to be a funeral home. Trump showed the prince posters of the assorted planes, tanks, ships, and munitions his oily billions might buy him, like an infomercial in the Oval Office. What use is an adaptogen when I worry my own daughter should soon prefer the hazards of an underworld to those of this and social media? I dropped a fossilized trilobite in the toilet, and it cracked in half. Millions of years of structural integrity finished just like that. Without Persephone, it all froze over. No crops grew. It was almost the end of us, but Zeus, her father, pulled strings to get her back. This service won't reactivate. I have come to love catachresis because what's wrong with it is right. I light my heart with so much emptiness, there's room here in the dark for everything. War-related violence in Libya left 47 civilians dead this May. 38 men, 3 women, 4 boys, and 2 little girls to dust returneth. One version of the myth says Hecate leads Persephone to her mother with torches at the end of winter. Mother with torches at the end of winter. Some days I just sit back and watch things tear each other apart. It is winter on and off now through the end of spring. Emotion is everything and nothing. Same is true for structure. I said to my daughter on the phone, be an honest person. Just be an honest person. Be honest. Be honest. Be honest. Some days I can't believe what it means to be alive some days. Some days I think about tearing myself apart, but not exactly with pleasure. Some days I know the strongest feeling is grief, but I believe it must be love. It has to be, has to be, has to. Some days I feel each cell in my body has its fingers crossed. I'm going to read a poem for our friend Max Whitlow, and it's who passed away. No one like him ever in Oregon. The Endless. I saw a yellow butterfly flying, in my opinion, the wrong way, flying across the Sound to Connecticut. I saw a cormorant, oily looking, flying close to the sea surface, precisely as I floated on it, on my back in the attitude of the crucifixion. Minerals in my body in conversation with the minerals of the sea. About the sun, how can I possibly add to what's already been said so well by the ancients, and said with an austerity I'll never know? It is an honor to take a back seat to the ancients. Who knew how? I was a fat white fish dissolving under the sold-out stadium sun like a god. But like a god, I could live through anything. Just 3 more. This one, I hope, please feel that you can laugh at this ridiculous poem. This poem is about choices. I've never heard this said that before reading this poem before, but it is about choices, bad ones, but one enough to them. It's called Diet Mountain Dew.
There we go.
I have built my ship of death, and when a wind kicks up, I'll cut it loose to do its thing across an unnamed lake of you, a firefly sent pulsing through the nonstop estivation of the verses of our South, who in its larval phase would feast on bitter worms and snails, who emerges from its mud chamber, our planet's most efficient luminescence, who turns chemical energy into radiant energy, shedding very little heat. So will I sail the compass of you, pleased with my cold flight. I have built my ship of death, aglow in sturdy chemicals and powered up at night like American Express. I'm all customer service, only minus the customer. No service to speak of other than death. You will know my logo by its absence and slogan from the past ad for the sugared style of you on TV in my youth. It goes like this: when my thirst is at its worst, and then I let it trail off into the unsayable. Or is it just unsaid because my mouth is full of you again? A green like no other green in the dale, indelicate green or green indecent, surpassing the fern and sprout in April's optimistic leaflet. Some stop to admire in nature. They take photographs non-cognizant of other vehicles. You are too green for pasture. You are my green oncoming vehicle. Usurper of green, assassin to the grasshopper and its plan. I put me in your path, which is the path a planet takes when it means to destroy another. I think you know I'm okay with that. A green like no other green, resplending in production since 1940 when brothers Barney and Allie Hartman cooked it up in Tennessee qua private mixer named after moonshine. Its formula then revised by Bill Bridgeforth of the Tri-City Beverage Corp in 1958. Year Linwood Burton, chemically inclined entrepreneur and ship cleaning service owner, sold his formula for a relatively safe maritime solvent to Procter & Gamble of Ohio, who went on to market it under the name of Mr. Clean, whose green approaches yours, then at the last second swerves into a joke yellow plays on green to make blue jealous till it blows up in its face, but I can't not love the smell of it. Citrus reimagined by an extraterrestrial lizard, which is to say inhuman in the way you say inhuman to me, a compliment unraveled in the drawl. Hey you over there, you look so unaccustomed to temporality, I would have sworn you were inhuman. And time for it after time I fall, further evidence of my humanity. I am at heart no less susceptible to rot than the felt hat on the head of the rifle-toting barefoot hillbilly, your mascot until he disappeared in 1969. Instinct says he must have shot his self in the woods in the mouth one sunrise when a frost was at hand and the apples fell thick, and he was way too awake when he did so not to think there would be another waiting like a can of you in the 12-pack in my refrigerator. I have built my ship of death, and enough already. Every toxic sip of you preparing for the journey to bloviation. I leave to return and return to depart again the stronger for a satisfaction being bound to no port has afforded me. I have built my ship of death so that even when I crawl back down into the hold of it, alive as what unnaturalness in you can keep me, it's only to emerge from the other end of it intact and perfectly prepared to be your grasshopper. The last one. This is called Insomnia. As darkness dissolves the forms of things, they appear to merge into the one unbroken substance they have been all along, no single component of which can be said to exist by necessity, but with such continuous relation to all other components, it's as if nothing can be lost without change to everything. Nothing can be lost without losing everything. And this last poem is called The Human. It's kind of like a hidden track in the book. It's not in the table of content. And I wrote this last poem I wrote for the book because after going through the book so many times when you're preparing for publication, I started feeling that maybe the book had a lot of, it was kind of down. on humans, humanity. And I thought I should try to find a way to move things a little, poke things up a little bit, at least the way I felt about things. Am I being really specific? I think I'm being vague. I texted my wife today. I said, oh, she mentioned something. Oh no, I guess it's terrible. She showed me this particular kind of lunch meat, which actually is made of different color meats that, like a clown face. Yeah, you saw this? Yeah. And so I was kind of like, I don't, sure, part of me was really appalled, but at the same time I was like, well, you know what, we're still doing that. So there's like, someone's still feeling pretty good about something. And so I texted her, I said, whatever I said about humanity, I take it back. And she said, what, WDYM? And I was like, yeah. So this is called The Human. I'll also say that I used to think that I was like a darkness person, like I needed to be in the shadows, or like late at night was my time, but we moved into an apartment with a lot of sun in it. And I was like, oh, I like sun. I like light. The human. In the interim, I will find a way to feel at home with the animal. Aristotle in his Politics says nature made for politics because alone among animals it enjoys the gift of speech. Other animals have a voice to indicate what is pleasant, what painful, and to relay it to each other. But true speech, says Aristotle, takes things further and is intended to make clear what is beneficial, what harmful, what is good or bad. And this, among animals, is peculiar to the human, who alone enjoys perception of the just, which nature would never provide without cause, he says, but does so that they might live collectively, in communities, and not like those of the goat, which seeks only what gives pleasure and wanders endlessly to avoid pain, but in settlements, vast cities, it takes politics to build, an effort extended across centuries like bridges over waterways, their lengths reflected in the flowing underneath them and up glass faces of towers the sun illuminates with such intensity it feels like intention, the will of what is to go on, to take things further, to adapt parts of the body intended for breathing into a means to force air into sounds, sounds into words, words into prayers of thanks to the sun. And when I close my eyes to brace against the late imperial effects of it, I feel a forebear step forward from a cave in thought, its arms extended as if to take part bodily in the beauty of what we call sky, and through some new distortion in the throat, indicates what the many, still situated in the dark behind us, come one by one to tremble at the mouth to see. Thank you.